Welcome to Lunchbox Learning at the Upcountry History Museum. My name is Sarah Wright. I am the Education Coordinator here. If this is your first time joining us for Lunchbox Learning, this is a monthly program we have that covers national, state, and local history. Really, the topics vary quite a bit, as you can tell by our next one, if anybody picked up the flyer. But I'm so thrilled to have you all here today. This program would not be possible without all of you or without our sponsor, Haynesworth St. Clair Boyd. Next month, on August 27th, we are welcoming back Dr. Rod Andrew Jr. from Clemson University. He is going to be presenting on Operation Starlight, which is the first U.S.-only Marine operation in the Vietnam War, which will be the 60th anniversary of that operation next month. So you can get tickets online or at our front desk if you're interested in that. This month, we are welcoming a great friend of the museum, Mr. John Nolan, to talk a little bit about some local history, the Camperdown Mill. So we're really thrilled to have him. He has been giving tours of the Greenville area for over 20 years. He's the owner of Greenville History Tours, and he is pretty much an encyclopedia of this area. So it's great to have him here. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Nolan.
Thank you so much. It's a thrill to be here. How many of you have grew up in Camperdown Mill Village? Anybody? Or their families? Anybody? Okay. Well, this certainly is a familiar topic, I think, to everyone. The name Camperdown is splashed around still around town. And this is a new lecture for me. I've got about 25 that I do on Greenville history, and I was thrilled to compile this and put this together, kind of how it got started and what it was all about over the years. So I look really forward to sharing all this with you. I've got a lot of historic pictures, and I've got some artifacts as well that are really exciting. I have been known to go a little long. So if anybody needs to leave at any certain point, I certainly won't feel bad. And if you need to just boot me out of here at some point, just go ahead. But I'll try to stay on time. All right, so let's get started here. So the textile industry. Got to go over the pond over to England to really its origins for the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of that was happening in the 1700s. There were a lot of people who were wealthy, who could afford better and fancier clothing. Technology was developing enough to meet that demand. And so big changes happened in England in the 1700s. And one of the first big steps forward for increasing production was the invention of the flying shuttle. So before this, people had to weave through every thread. It was very laborious. So the flying shuttle sped it up and shot that thread through very quickly. So that was an early invention. And then you have the spinning jenny invented, where one person can spool a lot of thread at the same time. So that sped things up. And then you have the invention of the water frame, which brings water power into the equation and mechanizes the process even more. And then finally the power loom, where that led to the factories and the mass production and all of that. So all of this is happening in the 1700s in England primarily. So it's all in place by about 1790, all of these kind of developments and inventions. And the first textile mill to appear in America was the Slater Mill in Rhode Island. So this is just right as this is all happening. And so first one. And it doesn't take very long for textile production to come down to Greenville County, South Carolina. And but before it came down, Boston became the hub of the early textile industry. The first mill was in Rhode Island, but a lot of the mill owners and merchants were based in Boston, and a lot of the manufacturing started to grow up around there. So in early American history, that was the hub of the textile industry. But in 1820, just 30 years after the first mill in America, we start seeing them pop up here on streams in Greenville County. So some of the very early ones, John Weaver, Hutchings, a few others, did some small mills in southern Greenville County and kind of around the area. Then you get William Bates, who puts up his on Rocky Creek in 1834. That house of his, which may be familiar to you up there in the upper part, that was his house that he lived in. It's still there on Highway 14, right near Rocky Creek. And it's pretty great to still have a remnant of that. And by the way, Hans and Franz Beer Garden that's over there on Highway 14, that building was part of the Batesville Mill. So that's an early remnant of that. Henry Hammett married into the family of Bates, and both of those men went on to start the Piedmont manufacturing, which was the biggest operation in the area eventually. But we have this happening in the earlier 1800s. Now, before the Civil War, the cotton was all being grown down here, and it would be shipped up to factories in New England. And so after the Civil War, there was a big migration for the industry to the South. Owners wanted to be closer to the cotton. I mean, why send it all up there and pay the expense of all that freight when you could build mills right near the cotton? And after the Civil War, there was a lot of cheap labor down here as well. So that was another factor. Now, up in Boston, one of the companies up there was Sampson Hall and Company. So this was Oscar Sampson and George Hall. Here are a few ads for their store in Boston on Devonshire Street. So they were in a general mercantile industry, but also cotton brokers. And so they were one of the many up there. But this is where they were located, right on Devonshire, which was right where, in the heart of where Boston burned down in 1872. So they were one of many people in that industry who's lost everything up there. So here's a painting of that, the aftermath of it. And so Sampson and Hall looked to put a mill in Greenville. So here's an advertisement from that time period, 1874, in the newspaper. And that is Oscar Sampson. That is the Sampson of Sampson and Hall, a very prominent businessman. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo of George Hall or George Putnam, but George Putnam was the son-in-law of Oscar Sampson. George Hall was the business partner, so it was the three of them who looked to start a mill here in Greenville County. So, where was their mill at? Right downtown on the lower waterfall, okay? So you would have thought that maybe they would have chosen the upper falls, but nope. So I'm with the Greenville County Historic Society, and the collection there is unbelievable. I mean, there are things that I come across and hold that I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm seeing this in person. And one of them is the contract for Alexander Macby selling the land to Oscar Sampson in 1874. We have the contract in the collection. So here's part of it. Here's another part of it. So the Macbys had a grist mill down there in the lower falls. And that was going to be renovated and expanded to occupy Sampson and Hall's mill. So they're spelling it all out here. A 10-year agreement with some possibilities for future expansion after that. So this is a part of the document here, plotting out the lands on the deed where the village houses would go, up on the bank there. So here's a clipping talking about the lease, 10 years, and 9 cars of machinery arrived in Greenville at the depot. So, and by the way, we already had the railroad here, came in 1853, so that was easy for them to sort of get everything they needed here, but I would imagine that was quite a job going from the depot down to the river area with all of that machinery, with horses and wagons. So here's their mill. I'm going to show you, I think, 4 pictures that I have of it. This is one that I discovered a year or so ago in a publication. I had never seen it before. And so they weren't producing cloth, though. This first mill was just thread and yarn. So, and actually, it remained that for most of its history. It's the next one that comes along that ends up doing fabric. But thread and yarn. Here's another picture of it. So this one is obviously kind of taken from the upper falls, looking down towards the mill. And look on the hill and back of it there. See the houses? And then this is a view from the other angle, kind of on that hill where the houses are, looking down to this. This is a later picture because we see the Camperdown mill on the other side. But that's sort of the back side of the mill. And another one from the upper falls looking down to the mill. And again, there's the houses for the workers on the hill there. And very little is known or discussed about those houses for the village workers. I mean, much more is known about the upper mills village. But this one, you know, when Furman took it over eventually, they ended up getting rid of a lot of those houses. But, I mean, Furman had already been there. But, yeah, those weren't the ones that lasted a long time. All right. So just to orient you, this picture on the bottom is a current picture of the lower falls. So that picture on the top, there's the falls right there. And there was a huge dam above it. So they needed that dam to pool up the water to have enough volume there to power the factory. And up on the hill there, on the upper right, that stone building, that's MacBee's old grist mill, which the stones of that mill are used for the Gasaway Mansion over off of East North Street. Main Street's kind of in the background there. I don't think we can see the Touchstone house there. I don't think it's that one on the left. Anyway, here's another view of all that water pooled up. You know, today we're used to it as a fairly shallow area down there, but for a long time that was a lake, a pond at least. And of course, that became a big swimming hole for villagers and for people around town. Go skinny dipping. You read about them skinny dipping in that place all the time. So here's another one.
Is any of that down here where you can see what looks like it used to be a mill, it's brick, near where the
Yeah, those ones on the left, yeah, there's ruins of one of those still there. Yeah. Now these are the ruins today of that Sampson and Hall mill. So if you go down to that lower waterfall area, you will see these. That's where the water wheel was placed. And bricks from that mill that we just saw photos of. So pretty cool to still have that around. And I took these pictures 20 years ago or so, maybe more. Those are all gone now. They've trimmed those rods off, you know, for hazards for people tripping and whatever. But I fortunately took some pictures of it when they were still there. So those are remnants of the Sampson and Hall mill as well. All right, so at the time the Sampson and Hall mill was built, this newspaper article that same year in '74 listed that we had 7 factories in our county. Now, I haven't had time to go back and really, some of these names were new to me. Sullivan's, I really don't know anything about that. Batesville, of course, we know about. Lester's, I know about. David's, I have no idea what David's mill is. And some of you can help me if. And then Sampson Hall and Company, that's the one we're talking about. Morgan's and I've heard of Wilden's, I've never heard of Morgan. Well, actually, I think that's Morgan and Wilden's is one mill that they're talking about there. And Piedmont was in the works. It ended up not actually opening until 1876, but it was in the works. It was already chartered by then. So we were growing as a textile county, but this was the first one in the city limits, the Sampson and Hall mill. So here's a notice also of it opening. The new dam has been finished and now filled with water. So it's talking about all that. But didn't take long for them to realize the prosperity of that mill. It did well. So they're like, hey, let's do another one. But let's go in the Upper Falls this time with the next one. So this is talking about them planning it. $250,000 in capital stock for it. I mean, in 1875, that's a whole lot of money. I mean, it still is, but. So this is the first time I found in this article that the name Camperdown began to be used. So it was incorporated. They needed to give it a name. And so that started being printed. Camperdown Mills Cotton Manufacturing Company. So the name Camperdown, that was kind of a mystery for a while. I've read in some of the old Dinky, I'm going to talk about what Dinky is, but a newsletter from the Camperdown, they speculated that the pioneers and the Indians would go down to that area and camp down there. And they thought that maybe the name came from that. And then for a while there was this thought that the Camperdown elm was the namesake for the mill. That didn't come to America till 1870. And it's a grafted tree, so the thought was that there were Camperdown elms growing in that area where they put the mill. But it was way too late introduced to America for that to have been growing there. So that's not the name of it. But this mill, this Camperdown mill in Dundee, Scotland, was built in the 1850s. So it had been around for a while. And Ron Norris, a while back, did some research and discovered that the Earl of Camperdown, the 4th Earl of Camperdown, moved to Boston. And he was the last Earl of Camperdown. And was in some of the same social circles as Oscar Sampson, who named the mill. So that's probably how it happened. But we don't know it absolutely for sure. But it really does have to go back to this mill. And there were Scottish workers at the mill too. So. All right, so this one's telling us about the machinery being brought in for Camperdown, the new one on the Upper Falls. 100 carloads of machinery. There were only 9 for the other one.
Was that because the machinery was being made in Boston?
Apparently. This Lynn, Massachusetts is where it was coming from. I haven't looked it up to find out what manufactory was there for machinery, but apparently it was made up there.
Is any of the machinery still in some of the old ones?
I don't know of any from Camperdown anywhere.
In any of the other mills?
Oh.
All the machinery gone?
Yeah, I mean, they've got an old one up there, but it's not this old. Yeah, in the displays upstairs. Okay, so the location for the new mill. This is an 1860 painting of our waterfall by William Scarborough. And Jacob Cagle had his lumber planing mill up on that site on the Upper Falls, right next to it. So that's the land that they bought for their new mill. And apparently there was a building there that Cagle had for his planing that they added onto and expanded. You know, there's really not much other than that description that was made of it to know, you know, what was originally his planing mill, but that's where it was. Now, this is an old stereoscopic picture, you know, where they have the double pictures and you would, you know, look through the little stereoscope thing. And I've known about this picture for a while, and I colorized it, so that's why you see it in color here. It was originally black and white. But it dawned on me, that construction right there seems to be for the tower. Now, the water tower and the smokestack are over here. They're on this side of the mill, in front of that part of the mill. So this is clearly on the other side of the building, which the only thing over there would have been the tower. So this may be an 1875 photo with the mill being built. I mean, other than that, it was under construction, or there may have been damage and they needed to fix something, but it's definitely the tower. And I looked up when stereoscopic pictures were popular. Started in the 1830s, but it really, 1850 to 1900, that was the sweet spot for stereoscopic pictures. So we're right in that time period for this to have been taken in 1875. So that's pretty exciting, if that is in fact what we're seeing here. And some of you will remember the old City Hall, which originally was the post office, right there. Tower sticking up, corner of Broad and Main. All right, so this second mill was a northern and southern operation. So it wasn't just Sampson and Hall and Putnam. There were local guys who started to invest and be part of the stock company. I mean, these are all very familiar names. We have a Donaldson in the house right now that goes back to TQ Donaldson. But Beatty, Cox, I mean, this is a who's who of early Greenville. And so this is kind of the breakdown of some of the positions of people there with that mill. So here's an 1884 Sanborn insurance map that shows us the two mills and their orientation to the bridge and the river and the streets that were laid out. Now, interestingly here, look at that street name on the right, Fall Street. It's actually Falls, but it says Fall there. And actually, Fall Street really is where McBee is shown right there. And that's not McBee Avenue. That's a different, it must be McBee Street. I didn't include the whole part of the photo there. But these are early names for this, this village streets. So here's a view from the bridge, the Main Street Bridge, looking down. So very industrial. I mean, downtown Greenville in a short time became very industrial with all the smoke, you know, going around and the noise of the machinery and all of that. So there it is. So here's the Sampson and Hall Mill. Now once they had the two mills, they changed the names. So the upper mill became Camperdown number 2, and what was Sampson and Hall became Camperdown number 1. Okay? So Camperdown number 1, this is the lower mill, the original one. So pretty small, picker room. That's where they brought in the cotton in its raw state and did the initial taking out of inclusions and dirt and sticks and, you know, all that stuff. Then they go into the main room for the carding, which was more of a refinement, getting into a nice sliver of thread and then twisting and spinning the thread. So it was a thread factory. There's the race that we talked about, going over to the dam. This is a later picture of the old office building. Shortly before, well, actually, I think this is right after it burned. But that's kind of a bad newspaper photo of the office building for that early mill. So ultimately, that first mill, Camperdown number 1, closed in the 1920s for good. Here's after it burned in 1943 during the war. It burned down. It was, by then it was paper storage. Did a bunch of scrap paper. It was very flammable. So it burned down. So that smokestack was there for a little while after the building was taken away. Okay, so I'm really not going to talk about that first mill. That's kind of some things about that. We're going to focus on the one that everybody, you know, kind of is aware of, Camperdown number 2. So we'll look at some of the features of this mill. So here's an 1884 insurance map that gives us some of those little details. I mean, this is for 8 years after it opened, but, you know, probably some of the same essential things that were in place here. So this is an overall map, but I'm going to zoom in and talk about some of the details here. But again, the picker room and the carding, reeling, twisting, spinning, same thing that we saw in that lower mill. Now this also started out as a thread factory. No looms in this building until 1904. That actually was new to me. As I was researching, I didn't realize that they didn't make fabric till a little bit later. So here's the spinning room. This is inside the Camperdown mill. Isn't that amazing? I colorized this, and so those, you know, might not be the exact colors, but hey, it's awesome.
So do you know the process here? Is that like, where's the rock on?
That's, it's already gone through the cleaning stage, so they're twisting the fibers here and making it into thread out of those cans.
Okay, thank you.
So did they take the thread and ship it back north to make the fabric?
I'm not sure. Maybe they made it for some local mills that were already here. There were plenty of those that were making fabric here. So that would make more sense. Now this is a later photo when it was weaving. So, but that's the weave, that's inside the Camperdown mill. Now, you see those belts going up to the ceiling. And those beams in the ceiling went over to the water wheel and the steam power. This was steam and water powered, by the way. But there were a lot of hazards for people, you know, walking through here. I mean, you can imagine the noise of these machines all day, super loud, deafening. and lint flying around in the air all day. The workers breathing it in all day. And of course, they were called lint heads because the lint always settled on them, and you know. The heat. I mean, we're in July right now, and it's been really hot lately, right? And we go outside and we think we're really hot. Imagine working in there for 10 hours on a July day. I mean, it must have been 120 degrees or more. I don't know. And of course, people would lose fingers all the time in these machines, getting caught in them. Okay, so a little bit of the grounds of the Camperdown. So on the upper left there, we see the cotton platform. So that's where apparently it was being unloaded from the wagons. The red second arrow there, that's the office building. So on these maps, when you see red, it's brick. When it's yellow, it's wood. So just above the office building are some storage buildings, oil and some other things. And then the far right arrow, that's the wood pile. The wood pile went all the way around that corner. And by now we see a bunch of houses there on the street.
Are they using the wood to make the steam?
I don't know.
What street are those mill houses?
That would be today what's Fall Street.
Falls.
Mhm. Okay, so this photo, there's the mill on the right. There's that brick office building that I was just showing you on that left-hand arrow. There's Main Street. There's the Main Street Bridge over there to the left. There's the post office. Not City Hall yet. Isn't that great? Oh, I love these old photos. It's like, oh, look where all those buildings were. What were they? Those were all homes, mostly. This is Macbee's mill here, the grist mill. It's still there.
That's not the current picture.
No, that's the 1890 bridge. So here's the dam. So they had to dam up the water for this mill as well. So that's where it was. It was not far from the bridge. The Main Street Bridge. That's the Main Street Bridge right there. It was wood.
So when did they move from water to steam, or was it a combination?
It was a combination at the beginning, from what I've read. And these maps show an engine room for steam, but there's also a race for water utilizing that power as well. So if you're going to dam up the water, you need to channel it over to the mill. So there's the race where the water came over directly to the mill. And there it is in a photo. Isn't that awesome? So there's the Reedy over there, pretty dry. But they pulling up the water with that dam and channeling it over to the mill. There it is again. And there's the office building on the left. And by then they had built some other little buildings there. Okay, so this original building for Camperdown, notice the yellow parts, those were wooden, and those were the roof vents. So if you see photos of the mill, notice the vents. That'll help try to give you an indication of the age of the photo, because the original building just had these two vents on the roof. I'll show you when it changes later. So there it is. There's a photo with that original vent on the ceiling, one of them. And right next to it, coming out off of the side of the building, there's a stairwell jutting out. And then finally, that building on the far right. Any guesses what that is? Uh-huh. See right there? It says WC. That's where they went to the bathroom during their shift. Right into the reedy. So we see the engine room there, the steam power, smokestack, water tower, wheelhouse. So by this 1920s insurance map, we see the building expanded. It's longer than it was in that last one. And notice that yellow line all the way down that roof. That's the new venting that spans the whole building. And I'm not exactly sure when that, I'll find out eventually, but somewhere between the last one we saw and this one. Okay, so that's a lot about the building and the property. Let's talk about the village, okay? So mill villages all had sort of a typical, features. They'd build the mill, they'd build the houses, they'd build a store, they'd build a school. School sometimes came later. The church kind of sometimes came later as well. But those were all here. Everything they needed was right there. And that's the model for villages all around Greenville. But the difference with Camperdown is it was just a block away from Main Street. So these folks in this village had access to the life that everybody else had. But they still had their own stuff in their community. How many of you, there's got to be people in this room that remember those kind of street markers? Yeah. Those were on every corner of every street in Greenville. Those cement pylon type things with the street names on them. There's a few still left around town. On my Mill Village tours, we go through like Monaghan and some others, and there's a few still there. But this one, Boyce and Choice Street. So that's right across the street from where United Community Bank is now. That corner is what we're seeing right there. And the building in back of them right there, that's the boarding house for Camperdown. Here's another picture of it. So maybe if you were hired and they didn't have a house for you yet to live in, or maybe you were a temporary worker or something like that, you would stay in the boarding house. So that's what we're seeing there.
Did they have to buy the houses or were they given to them?
The mill owned every house and boarding house until usually after World War II is when they started selling it off. Okay, so Camperdown had two churches, Choice Street Methodist Church, beautiful building, very classical. So there it is. So there's the Camperdown. You can see the blue there, the reedy. And Choice Methodist was right along Choice Street there. Anybody go there? Now every mill in Greenville had a Baptist church and a Methodist church. Yeah, that's the bare minimum. Some had Presbyterian, I think maybe Catholic at some point, but Baptist and Methodist every village. So the first one in Camperdown was Riverside. This was a wooden structure. So this is on Choice Street, just a block away from the Methodist one that we just saw. So the congregation was formed earlier in the 1870s, but by 1889 they built this wooden building. And the wooden one lasted until 1940 when it was replaced by this building. And that's the building that's still here. But at the time, it was changed from Riverside Baptist to Second Baptist Church. And the reason they tore it down, well, no, I'm sorry. No, forget that. Anyway, the steeple that we see here, that's not the steeple that's on there today. That's the original steeple. But that's St. Paul's Anglican now.
What street is that on?
Sorry, Choice Street. That Camperdown Way would be the current street. So to orient you, here it is. Well, this is an aerial view of the Camperdown Mill Village. Look at all those houses. There were up to 1,500 people living in this village at its height. So there's the Baptist church. And I know we don't have the Church Street extension built yet. We'll get to that, but that goes right by there pretty soon.
When you say village,
Yeah.
are you talking just about it's a Camperdown village or Greenville as a village?
Just
or
Camperdown.
Just
the
Camperdown?
workers, yeah.
So Greenville was what? A town or a?
It was, let's see, when did it become a city? 1831 is when we incorporated as a
village?
principality, municipality. Anyway, this was for Camperdown.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's the gymnasium. And you see just above it there is the Reedy River. So this was just right next to the Methodist Church, really.
Do you know what that building is across from the Baptist church?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay. Sorry.
So this is the only picture I've ever seen this, and I've never seen a map that shows exactly where it is. But this is the Mill Pond. It's like, what? Mill Pond? I have seen no maps with this on it, because they never really mapped this area, which is further down the river and to the right of where the village was. But that's the gymnasium in the background there. So they must have filled it in for more housing for the village.
So is this the collected water before it goes in the mill, or is this?
I think this is totally independent of the river.
Excuse me, are you familiar with how St. Paul got that tree?
No.
I have a number of friends that go to St. Paul,
Okay.
and one of the pastors came from the beach, Pawleys Island,
Uh-huh.
and he came up here, T. Brown is his name, he's the pastor over there today.
Okay.
And the church was used as a rehab center for alcohol.
Oh, okay.
And later, there was an old Baptist minister. The church had pretty much disappeared.
Uh-huh.
And T. Brown went up, knocked on the door, and that old Baptist minister told him, "The Lord told me to give you this building." And that's how St. Paul's got that church. And
Interesting.
Of course, they took it, fixed it up, and
Yeah.
expanded it a great deal, and now it's a blooming church.
That's great.
That's the story behind
Yeah.
how they got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. So here's some of the mill houses. This is a later picture. I want to say this is maybe 1940s or so. So that's, not the typical mill village house that we're familiar with in a lot of the other villages. But that's on Lois Street. So those were some of the worker houses there. And every mill had a baseball team, right? The Textile League. Now they didn't have a field there on the property because Furman was right across the river and they had a baseball field, Manley Field. So the Camperdown boys used Manley Field over at Furman. Here's some of the stores later on. There's Falls Grocery. See there on the right-hand side? Now, this map, I believe this was this is the 1884 map. So we see those wooden houses, and right there, see where it says, see, DWG is dwelling, GRO is grocery. So that may have been the company store. I haven't heard of anybody really definitively say where the company store was. Maybe some of you could share with me later. I don't know. But that's listed as grocery. That may have been it. Now, we don't have any pictures of it, and we don't have any pictures inside, but this is the inside of the Poe Mill company store, which, you know, the one at Camperdown probably had the same flavor as this. You know, everything you needed was right there. You could get in your company store. Okay, now scrip, mill money. Every mill in Greenville had their own currency. Now, people were paid in real money, but the rent would be deducted out of their paycheck before they got any real money. So they weren't left with a whole lot to live on. So they would use mill money to borrow against the next paycheck. But you could only use the mill money at the company store, right? I sold my soul to the company store. There's a lot of truth to that because people were always in debt. I mean, in one sense it helped them, but in another sense it enslaved them. So this is the only type of mill money I've ever seen of the Camperdown Mill. 1905. There's one at the museum over in the Second Baptist or St. Paul's Church. That's the first time I ever saw a Camperdown Mill coin. Since then, I've seen 3 more. I've only seen 4 in my lifetime. I started collecting, I don't know, 6 years ago. But since then, after this first one, the other 3, I've owned all 3. So here's 2 of them right here. The third one that I had, I gave to a very dear friend. But
Do you know what they got paid and related to now?
generally in the late 1800s, early 1900s, about 10 cents an hour. So 25 cents was a couple hours' wage. Okay, there's Larry Irwin. He was in charge of the dope cart. Most mills had a dope cart that would be pushed around in the mill. And, you know, the bosses were like, let's find out a way to keep these guys working longer. So let's feed them and give them caffeine while they're working so they don't have to take breaks. So those would be pushed around, and they'd have sandwiches and pimento cheese probably. And, but most importantly, they had Coca-Colas. Those were the dopes. That's what had the caffeine that really kept them going and why they were called dopes. So there's one. And here's mine. This was bottled in Greenville in 1917. So it says Coca-Cola, Verner Springs. So this is a local bottle. It doesn't have that iconic shape yet for the hobble skirt shape of Coke. And it's heavy. If you want to come hold it later, it's heavy.
When the actual drug Coke was taken out of
Early on, yeah. By 1900, the cocaine was gone. There's a bunch of workers holding their dopes. Okay, so the Fall Street Cafe, a very nostalgic place for a lot of folks. How many of you had a hot dog there? At the original store? Okay, boy, am I jealous of you. Now, for those of you who don't know, every year they do an annual Back to the Cat Dive hot dog lunch, where the original recipe for the chili that the Lowe's made is they make the hot dogs with the chili again every year in May. So look out for the Cat Dive hot dog lunch every year. But anyway, this was started by Noe Lowe in 1932 during the Depression. So there it is. Here's an aerial view. Here's the mill. Here's the bend of Fall Street, still there. And there's the Fall Street Cafe, the Cat Dive that everybody called it. Because there was an advertisement in the building that had it was an automotive thing, a tire thing, I think. There was a cat diving into tar. So it was called the Cat Dive. But its official name was Fall Street Cafe, but that's a misnomer because Mr. Lowe ordered the wrong signage, and they didn't have the S on the signage when they sent to them. Because that's Fall Street. But on the sign it just says Fall Street. So there he is, Noe Lowe. He worked at the mill, and there's a need for a cafe in the community for people to have a good, cheap, comfort food, hang out, gossip, whatever. So we started that up in 1932. There's his son Rick with him on the right, who later took over the cat dive from his father and ran it till he retired. So yes, you could get an all-the-way hot dog there, and a 70. Used to be 70 cents. That's why they call it the 70. So I'll have a 70. That meant you got chopsticks smothered with onions and gravy. All right, so 1891. This is an original, not a copy, an original stock certificate from the Camperdown Mill. I was beside myself when I got that. So really interesting. There's this is $500 worth of shares for ownership in this company. In 1891, that's a lot of money. So look at the beneficiary there, Mary J. Wiley. And it's signed by Henry Hammett, who I mentioned earlier was part of the Batesville Mill and started up Piedmont Manufacturing. By now, he was president of the Camperdown Mill. But this certificate is the 18th of March. He died a month and a half later. So this may be one of the last signatures that he ever put on a document. And you can see it right there. But there's this nice engraving of the mill on the certificate. I mean, there's some artistic liberties taken here, but as far as the orientation of the river and everything, but pretty cool.
Was there any purpose? Most of the mills were just about thinking about a structure. Their pretty center piece has a nice look to it.
That was that was stairs. It was practical. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the village features. Let's talk about some of the people. Okay. So Camperdown and a lot of these mills going on at the time, a lot of the folks were coming down from the mountains and in the hillsides nearby, mostly with Scottish and Irish in their heritage. Generally very poor, living in cabins like this. Very little as far as a steady paycheck up there. No school for their kids generally to go to there. So they could go to a mill like Camperdown and get a steady paycheck, get a school for their kids sometimes, and a new house. So this is Graham's School. That's where the kids went to school. So that's the building you were asking about earlier, right across from the Baptist church. That's right where the Greenville County School Administrative Offices is now, to orient you. But there were only elementary schools in mill villages. They didn't have high schools. They didn't need a high school. Yep. Kids went to work. So there's some kids from the Camperdown Mill Village sitting on that porch right there. There's the back side of the Baptist church. So this is Camperdown Way. That was Choice Street back then. Yeah, they didn't need high schools. And this is not in the Camperdown Mill, but that's the kind of thing that would go on. There were no child labor laws in the state of South Carolina till 1903. So having, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, that was okay. And in 1903, the first child labor law was for 10-year-olds. So if you were 11 or 12, you could still be made to work 10 hours a day. Here's some Camperdown. This is a Camperdown Mill employee photo. Most of them are children here. Few men. 1905. Two-thirds of the Camperdown workforce were women and children in their early days. Okay, so the mill whistle governed everybody's lives. It would tell them what to do throughout their day. Woke them up in the morning, 6:30, blew again to say, up, time to head to work. 7 o'clock, start your work day. Noon, it blew again. At 12:30, get back to work. 5 o'clock, the end of the day, shift's done, go home. So that was, and that's the actual Camperdown Mill whistle. That is in the museum over at St. Paul's Anglican. Amazing. So, it started out good. In 1893, there was a national depression. I mean, it wasn't the Great Depression, but there was a lot of economic downturn in 1893. And that really affected the mill here. So it closed. And so for, 9 years, the mill sat. Until Charles Graham bought it and resurrected it. So Graham had been owner of the Huguenot Mill just up the river. And that was his house that he built in 1900. That house is still here. It's now Legacy Advancement. That was Charles Graham's house. So he lived just a few blocks from the mill. Now the Huguenot Mill, that was the first plaid factory in the state of South Carolina. So they did a lot of fancy fabrics that no other mills were doing. So when Charles Graham, who was at Huguenot, took over Camperdown, he changed the name to Huguenot No. 2. I had no idea. I've seen this postcard, and it says Huguenot Mill. I thought, that's Camperdown Mill. I always thought that was a misprint. But nope. It was called Huguenot No. 2 for a while. I think it was very short-lived. But isn't that weird? So when he got to go and he had his daughter pull the lever to get those machines going again after 9 years of being dormant. And that's when they started using looms. That's when they started doing fabric. Up to now, they had always been just thread and yarns.
During the hiatus,
Yeah.
when the factory was closed, what happened to the village? I mean, what?
I suppose they just worked at other mills in town. Huguenot, Poe, American Spinning. I mean, there were a lot of choices. Yeah. So yeah, this postcard must be from right around 1904 because they labeled it Huguenot Mill. So so Huguenot had done ginghams and plaids. So when Charles Graham got Camperdown going again, that's the product he started making. Were ginghams and plaids and chambrays and stuff like that. So that got him going again. That got them back into their glory days. So there's an advertisement for their ginghams. They said they became world known for their fabric. Now, in 1908, one of the worst floods in Greenville history. Now we've had some bad ones here, in recent decades, but nothing like this. There's the Main Street Bridge there, the iron bridge. There's the trolley trellis that was under it. In 1908, that trolley trellis got wiped out by that flood. And the Camperdown mill was 5 feet underwater. Inside the mill, 5 feet underwater. Okay, now I've got a few photos here. I love old photos. You gotta love them too. And when they're detailed, you know, I just love looking at all the little things in there, you know. So this is the overall picture, but I'm gonna show you sections of it. Okay, but look at all that water. So here's closer on the left, there's that trolley trellis. There's going up to Main Street there. That's the Main Street Bridge. There's the post office. Ton of water going. That's the dam that we saw on that map earlier. So there's the mill. I mean, the water is all the way across. Look at it raging there. I mean, we've seen it raging, but it's pretty cool to see it raging 120 years ago or whatever this is. Okay, so this is a different photo. So I just showed you that one all the way across. This is another photo. That's McBee's old grist mills that are now dilapidated, the roof's caving in. The water's all raging and pooled up there. Look at that. That's cool. They're fixing the smokestack. I don't know if they're building it here because I don't know. This is a little bit of a mystery to me. This may be an earlier photo than I think. Okay, so this is a description in the newspaper of some of the damage that was done from that 1908 flood. And another account says it was 5 feet underwater. Okay, this is so interesting. I just came across this recently. In 1908, they installed equipment for indigo dyeing. And I was like, what? What do you make? What do you make with indigo? What kind of fabric? Uh-huh. Bam. This is a 1944 dinky newsletter from the mill. Says they made denim in the Camperdown mill. I never knew that. I'm pretty positive that they're the only mill in Greenville that ever made denim. And I geek out about that kind of stuff. I don't know about you, but that is awesome that they made denim in that factory. But the Reedy River, boy, it was getting the toll paid from not only the Camperdown mill, but all the other mills by now that were dumping. That was the sewer of Greenville. So that's the old lower mill dam there. There's McBee's grist mills. There's the Main Street Bridge in the distance there. Here's a rough view from the same spot today. So during World War II, the people in the village published this newsletter called The Dinky. And there were a bunch of men from the Camperdown mill of the village who were sent over to fight overseas. So they thought, we want to do something to help them to stay in touch. So they created this newsletter with village news and who was, killed in action and, that kind of thing. So there were 26 issues, and then in the 2000s, the Dinky was revived by the current Historical Society, which is awesome. I would highly encourage, you could go down a big rabbit hole looking up these old issues, because it's just like, what was happening in the 1940s in the Camperdown Mill Village? It's really interesting. So the mill closed in 1956, not too long after the war ended. They were the first mill in Greenville to close because of overseas competition. The writing was on the wall. Most of the other mills in Greenville were closing in the 70s, but this is 20 years earlier. And part of that is because, well, the competition, but ginghams and plaids were their specialty, and the Japanese and the Chinese, they had that down. They were selling it much cheaper. So their primary competition was much lower in price, and their equipment was much older. The Camperdown wasn't changing with the times like others were. Yes, sir.
In 1956 and 1957, I delivered the afternoon newspaper, Greenville Piedmont,
Did you?
to the Camperdown village residents.
With the announcement of this?
Yes, they closed
Wow.
because of that, and a lot of people, of course, lost their employment. But they would always, my recollection of that village is that they always wanted me to come into their home weekly when I collected for the paper
Yeah.
to talk about the situation and everything that's going on.
Wow. How old were you at the time, if you don't mind me asking?
12 and 13.
Okay. Wow.
And there was a small grocery store run by a Lebanese lady right in the middle of the village. It was not this company store.
Okay.
She had her own little grocery store there
Yeah.
in the middle of the village.
Uh-huh. Wow. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So, closes. It quickly gets overgrown. And an eyesore. I mean, the river was already bad, but the mill getting overgrown, I mean, that was, and it was, you know, it was a source of pride for everybody for so long. Not just the Camperdown Mill community, but Greenville. I mean, that was the iconic building. Everybody saw it going over the Main Street Bridge. But now it's fallen apart. So, they tore it down in 1958. So here's the building being torn down. Oh, what I would give to have one of those shutters. If you ever see one in an antique shop in that shape, you know my number. So these were the samples of fabrics that were pulled off of the looms the day they closed. Somebody had the foresight. And I in the museum they have these, and the woman who did this, I think her name is Davis, maybe. But these are what they were making the day that they closed. Okay, so as a historian and a collector of Greenville things, there are certain things that I hope to get someday that I think I will never get. There are holy grail items, right? And one of them is the Mansion House stuff, anything related to the Mansion House. But Camperdown Mill, I mean, to have anything physical from that mill is like amazing. And that fabric, any fabric in Greenville is extremely rare. You would think that since we were the textile center of the world, with miles and miles and miles of fabric being made here every day, that you could find fabric that was made in Greenville. It's very difficult. And maybe some of you will come out of the woodwork with some. But I'm trying to, with the society, I'm trying to start a Greenville textile archive of pieces of fabric from these mills. Because they didn't print. By the 1950s when this closed, a lot of these mills were owned by bigger conglomerates. And they didn't print on the fabric made at Camperdown Mill, or made in Poe Mill, or made in Greenville. They didn't print that on there. And so in order to have fabric from these mills, you have to know somebody who worked there or lived in town, got a remnant from one of the stores, and kept it all these years and can trace it back. That's how you get
Good luck.
authentic fabric. Exactly, good luck. I've got about 6 Mills fabric, and I never thought I would have Camperdown Mill fabric. Until last year. So here it is. This dishcloth was made at the Camperdown Mill. Now, how did I get this? On Facebook, I just put a notice out there. If anybody has any fabric from these mills, let me know. This lady, Louisa Pritchard, contacted me and said, I have fabric from Camperdown Mill. I'm like, what? So she told me how she got it. She got it from Ron Tollison, friend of hers. Ron's mother was Bobby Everson. Bobby Everson's mother worked at the mill and had passed down fabric and her sewing kit and stuff down to the family. But Louisa didn't know the name of the lady that worked at the mill, Bobby's mother. She didn't know her name. So I'm like, oh, I've got to know this. I've got to be able to trace this fabric back to the mill. But I had some information. I had Ron's name, I had Bobby's name, and I had Camperdown Mill. So, do a little Googling, and sure enough, the obituary comes up. Ron Tollison, his mother Bobby, Bobby's mother was Isla Dodson. So this completed the circle. This let me know who had this fabric that I now have. And she worked at the mill for 15 years until it closed when you were passing out those newspapers. Now, it gets better. I didn't think it could get better. But I did a little more, now that I know her name, I did a little more searching. Isla Dodson, Camperdown Mill. And this comes up. This is an oral history project where they went around the South in 1980 interviewing people that worked at mills and farms to get their stories before they passed away. And they interviewed Isla Dodson. What? So I saw the button there for playing her audio, and I'm like trembling. I'm like, I'm going to hear her voice? Do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
I've got it right here. Okay. Hold on to your horses. Okay. Isla Dodson. Here we go. Oh. Okay, I'm going to turn this up. So the interviewer's asking her name. She says her name, and then she asks her where she's born, when she was born. She gets her birth date wrong. She says 1907. And then she corrects herself, no, 1927. And then she goes into some of her, and I've edited this, and she talks a little bit about when she was there when the Camperdown Mill closed. And
Isla, Hartsville, and Dodson there.
And when were you born?
January 23rd, 1923. Oh, no, 1923. Oh, that's 1907, January 23rd, 1907.
And whereabouts?
Buffalo, South Carolina.
Well, why did you want to weave so bad?
I told you I wore before I was born. Geddes.
her husband is Geddes.
Mama was a good weaver. That's all she talked about. And I just wanted to weave. I wore 15 years. You don't know nothing about this old mill down here at Camperdown, downtown.
Yes, I've seen pictures of it.
You have? When I worked there, in the Builders Bank, I worked there 15 years. That's the last work I did in the mill. Well, 15, now they had, we were made cloth like this.
Plaid?
Plaid, yeah. Boy, I done really got up there where I was a good weaver then. I run the box looms.
Incredible. How cool is that? Documenting the American South. That was the name of the organization. It's a nonprofit. Alan Toulos was the interviewer. So there it is. That's the fabric right there. Incredible. So in 1956, when the mill closed, that's when they tore down the Methodist church, because the Church Street overpass was going through right there. Sad. So there's them building the Church Street overpass. And that was the beginning, the major beginning of the demise of the Camperdown village. So this star is in the same spot in each of these photos, 10 years apart. 1950s, when the mill was still running, filled with homes, built the Church Street overpass, wiped out a lot of it.
Point the mill out in the top picture for me.
Right there, the L-shaped thing.
Okay, thank you.
So right on the heels of that is when they built the Camperdown Bridge over the waterfall. So there's them building the Camperdown Bridge.
Did anyone ever mess with the actual falls itself? Did anyone break stone or anything to build from that?
No, the falls really were kept intact. Yeah. So look, yeah. I mean, there's the falls, but these pylons were right there in the mix. So that's the end of the Camperdown mill. And there's a whole lot more that's there, but anyway. I've got a few books that I've written that are up here if you want to peruse. Love to have you part of the Camperdown, the society. These are some of the tours I do. But thank you all for coming.